The letter arrived in a crisp white envelope, its edges sharp enough to cut through Connor's heart. He stood in his small Brooklyn apartment, the Manhattan skyline glinting through the window, and read the words that shattered his world. "You are not welcome at the party." His mother's 50th birthday, the event he'd spent months planning, was now a door slammed in his face because he was gay. Connor Tremblay, 25, had always been the family's golden boy. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Westchester, New York, he was the son who organized holiday dinners, remembered every cousin's birthday, and made his parents proud with his Ivy League degree. But when he came out at 22, the warmth of his family turned to ice. His mother, Eleanor, a polished socialite with a smile as practiced as her charity galas, had called his identity a phase before refusing to speak of it again. His father, a corporate lawyer, simply stopped looking him in the eye. Yet Connor, ever the optimist, believed he could mend the rift. When Eleanor's milestone birthday approached, he threw himself into planning her celebration, hoping his effort would remind her of the son she once adored. He was wrong. The party was set for a grand estate in the Hamptons, a place dripping with old money and older expectations. Connor had spent months coordinating caterers, florists, and musicians, pouring his heart into every detail. He'd envisioned his mother's face lighting up at the sight of her favorite peonies, the string quartet playing her beloved Vivaldi, and the guests, her elite circle of friends, raising glasses to her. He'd even designed the invitations himself, each one a work of art. But the letter, delivered to his apartment like a guillotine's blade, made it clear Eleanor didn't want her disappointing son tainting her perfect night. Connor sank onto his couch, the letter trembling in his hands. Ethan, his boyfriend of 2 years, knelt beside him, his blonde hair catching the lamplight. "She doesn't deserve you," Ethan said softly, his voice steady but laced with anger. Connor shook his head, tears welling. "I just wanted to make her happy, to show her I'm still me." Ethan pulled him close, and for a moment, the world felt less cruel. Ethan Caldwell, a graphic designer with a laugh that could melt winter, had been Connor's anchor since they met at a queer art gallery opening in Chelsea. Their love was a quiet rebellion against a world that didn't always understand them. But even Ethan's warmth couldn't erase the sting of Eleanor's rejection. The next morning, Connor woke with a fire in his chest. He wasn't going to let his mother erase him. He'd planned the party, poured his soul into it, and he deserved to be there, not as a guest, but as the architect of its magic. Ethan, sipping coffee at their tiny kitchen table, raised an eyebrow. "You're not seriously thinking of crashing, are you?" Connor grinned, a spark of defiance in his hazel eyes. "Not crashing. Showing up. There's a difference." The plan was audacious. Connor would attend the party, not to confront his mother, but to ensure every detail he'd crafted came to life. He'd slip in as a caterer, blending into the staff he'd hired. Ethan, ever the loyal accomplice, agreed to help, though his furrowed brow betrayed his worry. "If she sees you, it's going to be a scene," he warned. Connor shrugged. "Let it be. I'm done hiding." The days leading up to the party were a whirlwind. Connor confirmed final details with vendors, his voice steady over the phone despite the ache in his chest. He and Ethan rehearsed their cover. Connor would pose as a last-minute server, while Ethan would attend as a +1 to a friend who'd been invited. The friend, Lila, a fierce lesbian artist with a penchant for stirring up trouble, was thrilled to help. "Stick it to the wasps," she said with a wink. On the night of the party, Connor stood in the catering van, his black server's uniform feeling like armor. The Hamptons estate loomed ahead, its windows glowing with the promise of laughter and champagne. He adjusted his tie, his heart pounding. This was more than a party. It was his last chance to reclaim a piece of his family, or at least to prove he wasn't invisible. As the van pulled up, Connor caught a glimpse of the garden he'd designed. Fairy lights woven through ancient oaks, tables draped in ivory linen, and a dance floor under the stars. It was perfect, just as he'd imagined. But the sight of his mother's silhouette in the window, elegant in a silver gown, sent a pang through him. Would she ever see him the way she saw her perfect party? Inside, the event was a masterpiece. Guests in designer dresses and tailored suits mingled, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses. Connor moved through the crowd, tray in hand, his face a mask of professionalism. No one recognized the disowned son beneath the server's uniform. He overheard snippets of praise. "Eleanor, this is divine." And his heart swelled with pride, even as it broke. Ethan, across the room, caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. He was chatting with Lila, who was charming a group of older women with her wit. Everything was going according to plan. But then Connor saw her, Eleanor, gliding through the crowd, her smile radiant but cold. She hadn't noticed him yet, but the risk of exposure felt like a tightening noose. As he passed a tray of canapes, a guest grabbed his arm. "You," the man said, his voice slurred with champagne. "You look familiar. Are you one of Eleanor's boys?" Connor froze, his pulse racing. The man's wife, a woman with sharp eyes and a kinder smile, chimed in. "Oh, leave him alone, George. He's just doing his job." Connor mumbled a thank you and slipped away, his cover intact but his nerves frayed. By midnight, the party was in full swing. The quartet transitioned to jazz, and the dance floor filled with swaying couples. Connor allowed himself a moment to breathe, leaning against a tree at the garden's edge. Ethan found him there, slipping away from the crowd. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing Connor's. Connor nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I keep thinking maybe if I do this perfectly, she'll change her mind." Ethan's face softened. "Connor, you don't have to prove anything. You're enough." But before Connor could respond, a voice cut through the night like a blade. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor stood before them, her face a mask of fury. The music seemed to fade, the world narrowing to this moment. Connor straightened, meeting her gaze. "I planned this, Mom. Every detail. I wanted it to be perfect for you." Her lips trembled, but her words were venom. "You were told not to come. You're embarrassing me." The words hit like a slap, but Connor held his ground. "I'm your son," he said, his voice breaking. "Does that mean nothing?" The guests nearby began to notice, their whispers rippling through the crowd. Eleanor's face flushed with shame, but before she could respond, Lila stepped forward, her voice loud and clear. "This young man made this night happen. Every flower, every song, it's his. And you're throwing him out." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking uncomfortable. Eleanor's eyes darted to the guests, her perfect facade cracking. "This is a family matter," she hissed. But Lila wasn't done. "Family? You don't get to pick and choose family when it suits you." To Connor's shock, other guests began to speak up, a woman in a red dress, a man with a gray beard, all praising the party, praising him. Connor's heart raced. This wasn't the plan. He'd wanted to stay invisible, to prove his worth in silence. But now, standing in the garden he'd created, surrounded by strangers who saw him, he felt something shift. Maybe he didn't need his mother's approval. Maybe he never had. The air in the garden thickened with tension, the string lights casting long shadows across Eleanor's face. Connor stood frozen, his mother's words, "You're embarrassing me," echoing in his mind like a cruel refrain. But the murmurs of the guests, their unexpected defense of him, were a lifeline he hadn't anticipated. Lila, bold as ever, stepped closer to Eleanor, her voice cutting through the awkward silence. "You know, Eleanor, I've been to a lot of parties, but this one? It's got soul. And that's because of your son." She gestured to Connor, who was still clutching an empty tray, his server's uniform now feeling like a costume he no longer needed. The crowd's eyes were on him, some curious, others warm with admiration. Eleanor's composure faltered, her perfectly manicured hands clenching into fists. "This is not the place," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You're making a scene." Connor's throat tightened, but before he could respond, the woman in the red dress, Mrs. Hargrove, a philanthropist he'd met while planning, spoke up. "Eleanor, dear, if this young man planned this, he deserves to be here. It's spectacular." The words were a small victory, but they stung too. Connor had spent his life chasing his mother's approval, and now strangers were giving it freely. He glanced at Ethan, who stood a few feet away, his blue eyes fierce with pride. Ethan gave a subtle nod, urging Connor to stand tall. So he did. "Mom," Connor said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "I didn't come here to ruin your night. I came because I love you. Because I wanted to give you something beautiful." He gestured to the garden, the peonies glowing under the moonlight, the laughter of guests mingling with the music. "This is me, whether you accept it or not." Eleanor's face was unreadable, a mix of anger and something softer, regret, perhaps. But before she could respond, Connor's father, Richard, appeared at her side. His gray suit was impeccable, his expression as cold as ever. "Connor, leave. Now." His voice was a command, the kind that had silenced Connor as a child. But Connor wasn't a child anymore. "No," he said, surprising even himself. "I'm not leaving. I made this happen, and I'm staying to see it through." The words felt like a declaration of war, but they also felt like freedom. Richard's jaw tightened, but the guests' murmurs grew louder, a chorus of support that drowned out his authority. Lila clapped her hands, drawing attention. "Let's raise a glass to Connor," she called, snatching a champagne flute from a passing tray. To Connor's astonishment, dozens of guests followed suit, their glasses glinting in the light. "To Connor," they echoed, some smiling, others clapping. Ethan grinned, joining in, his voice the loudest of all. Eleanor's face flushed crimson, and she turned on her heel, disappearing into the house. Richard followed, casting a final glare at Connor. The party resumed, the music swelling, but Connor felt the weight of what had just happened. He'd stood up to his parents, in front of their world, and the world hadn't collapsed. In fact, it had cheered. Ethan pulled him aside, away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the garden. "You were incredible," he said, his hands cupping Connor's face. "I'm so proud of you." Connor leaned into the touch, his heart still racing. "I didn't plan for this," he admitted. "I just wanted her to see me." "She saw you," Ethan said. "And so did everyone else." They stood there, foreheads touching, the world fading to just the two of them. For the first time that night, Connor felt like he belonged. But the night wasn't over. As Connor returned to his role as a server, keeping up the pretense to avoid further conflict, he overheard whispers among the guests. Some were shocked at Eleanor's reaction, others sympathetic to Connor. "Poor boy," one woman said. "He's clearly talented. What kind of mother does that?" The words were a balm, but they also deepened the ache. He didn't want pity. He wanted family. As the hours passed, Connor worked tirelessly, ensuring the dessert course was flawless. The champagne never ran dry. He caught glimpses of his mother inside the house, her face tight as she spoke to Richard. Was she ashamed? Angry? Or, just maybe, rethinking her choices? Connor didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. Near the end of the night, Lila found him again, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "You've got fans," she said, nodding toward a group of guests who were still talking about him. "They're planning to hire you for their next event. You're a hit, Connor." He laughed, the sound bittersweet. "I didn't do this for fame," he said. "I did it for her." Lila's expression softened. "I know, but sometimes, the people who love you most aren't the ones you're born to." She squeezed his shoulder and rejoined the party, leaving Connor with her words echoing in his mind. As the final guests began to leave, Connor felt a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. He'd done what he set out to do. The party was a success, a testament to his skill and heart. But his mother's rejection still hung over him like a storm cloud. He was about to slip away when Mrs. Hargrove approached, her red dress catching the moonlight. "Connor, is it?" she said, her voice warm. "I want you to know this was the best party I've ever attended. You have a gift." She pressed a business card into his hand. "Call me. I could use someone like you for my foundation's gala." Connor stammered a thank you, overwhelmed by her kindness. As he and Ethan left the estate, the night air cool against their skin, Connor felt a shift inside him. He'd come to prove something to his mother, but he'd proven something to himself instead. He was enough, more than enough. And with Ethan by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. But the story wasn't over. The next morning, Connor woke to a flood of messages, not from his mother, but from guests. They thanked him, praised him, invited him to their events. His phone buzzed with notifications from social media, where photos of the party were circulating, his name tagged as the mastermind behind it. The world was starting to see him, even if his family wouldn't. Back in Brooklyn, Connor's apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in as he scrolled through his phone. The messages from the party guests were a whirlwind of validation, praise for his creativity, offers to collaborate, even a few bold inquiries about his availability for weddings and fundraisers. But none of them were from Eleanor. Her silence was louder than any rejection. Ethan, sprawled on the couch with a sketchpad, looked up. "You're trending on Instagram," he said, half teasing, half proud. Connor groaned, tossing his phone onto the coffee table. "I don't want to be a hashtag." I just wanted her to say something. Anything. Ethan set his sketchpad aside and pulled Connor into his arms. She will. Or she won't. But you showed up, and that's what matters. Connor buried his face in Ethan's shoulder, the familiar scent of his cologne grounding him. What if she never comes around, he whispered. Ethan's hand stilled on his back. Then we build our own family. One that loves you for you. The words lingered, a seed planted in Connor's heart. But the pain of his mother's rejection was still raw, a wound that refused to close. He spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions of his freelance event planning work. The buzz from the party had opened doors. Mrs. Hargrove had already booked him for her gala, and other clients were calling. But every success felt hollow without his family's acknowledgement. A week later, Connor received an unexpected call. It was from his younger sister, Sophie, the only family member who'd stayed in touch after he came out. At 19, Sophie was a college freshman at NYU, navigating her own rebellion against their parents' rigid expectations. Connor, she said, her voice hushed, Mom's been weird since the party. She keeps looking at those invitations you made, the ones with the gold foil. I think she's, I don't know, conflicted? Connor's heart skipped. Did she say anything? Sophie sighed. Not really. But Dad's been ranting about how you ruined her night. I told him he's full of it. Connor smiled despite himself. Sophie's loyalty was a small light in the darkness. Thanks. Sophomore, keep me posted, okay? That evening, Connor and Ethan met Lila at a queer-owned coffee shop in the East Village. Lila, ever the instigator, had a plan. You need to capitalize on this, she said, slamming her latte down for emphasis. People are talking about you, Connor. You're the guy who threw the party of the year and got kicked out by his own mom. That's a story. Use it. Connor frowned. I don't want to be a sob story. Lila leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. Not a sob story, a triumph. Start your own event company. Show the world what you can do. Ethan nodded, his hand squeezing Connor's under the table. She's right. You're already getting offers. Why not take control? The idea sparked something in Connor. He'd always loved creating experiences, weaving moments of joy for others. Maybe this was his chance to build something of his own, free from his family's shadow. By the end of the night, he'd sketched out a business plan on a napkin. Trembly Events, a company specializing in inclusive, heartfelt celebrations. Ethan, with his design skills, offered to create a logo, and Lila promised to spread the word among her artsy, affluent contacts. But even as Connor threw himself into this new dream, the ache of his family's rejection lingered. He couldn't shake the image of his mother's face at the party, her anger masking something deeper. Was Sophie right? Was there a crack in Eleanor's armor? 2 weeks later, Connor's fledgling business was already gaining traction. Mrs. Hargrove's gala was a hit, with Connor overseeing every detail from floral arrangements to lighting. The event, held at a Manhattan rooftop venue, was a celebration of her foundation's work for LGBTQ+ youth, a cause Connor hadn't known she supported until she told him. I saw what happened at Eleanor's party, she'd said, her eyes kind but firm. You deserve better. And so do the kids we're helping. The gala was a turning point. Connor moved through the crowd, no longer a server but the mastermind, his name whispered with respect. Guests sought him out, praising his vision, and for the first time, he felt seen not as Eleanor's son, but as Connor Tremblay, event planner extraordinaire. Ethan, by his side in a sharp blazer, beamed with pride. You're killing it, he whispered, stealing a quick kiss when no one was looking. But the high was short-lived. Late that night, as Connor and Ethan cleaned up after the gala, Sophie called again. Her voice was shaky. Connor, Mom found out about your new business. She's not happy. She thinks you're using her party to get famous. Connor's stomach dropped. What did she say exactly? Sophie hesitated. She said you're exploiting the family name. Dad's backing her up. The words were a punch to the gut. Connor had never wanted to exploit anyone. He'd only wanted to create something beautiful. He hung up, his hands trembling, and Ethan pulled him into a hug. They're wrong, Ethan said fiercely. You're building something real. Don't let them take that from you. But the doubt crept in. Was he betraying his family by succeeding without them? Or was he finally claiming the life he deserved? The questions haunted him as he and Ethan walked home through the city, the lights of Manhattan blurring through his tears. The weeks that followed were a blur of ambition and heartbreak. Connor threw himself into Tremblay Events, booking clients from New York's elite to Brooklyn's queer community. His reputation grew, each event a testament to his ability to create magic from chaos. But every glowing review, every new contract, was tinged with the shadow of his family's disapproval. Ethan was his rock, designing stunning visuals for Connor's events and reminding him to eat when he worked through the night. One evening, as they sat on their apartment's fire escape, watching the city pulse below, Ethan took Connor's hand. "You're building something incredible," he said. "But you're carrying them with you, your parents. Let them go." Connor wanted to. God, he wanted to. But the idea of losing his family entirely felt like losing a part of himself. He still checked his phone daily, hoping for a message from his mother, a sign that she might soften. None came. Then, a month after the gala, Sophie showed up at his apartment unannounced. Her eyes were red, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. "I had a fight with Mom," she said, collapsing onto the couch. "I told her she's wrong about you. She didn't take it well." Connor's heart ached for his sister, caught in the crossfire of their family's dysfunction. "What happened?" he asked. Sophie explained. She'd confronted Eleanor about her treatment of Connor, accusing her of hypocrisy for preaching family values while rejecting her own son. Eleanor had exploded, claiming Connor was choosing a lifestyle over his family. Sophie, defiant, had stormed out, taking a train to Brooklyn. "I'm proud of you," she told Connor, her voice fierce. "And I'm done pretending I'm okay with how they treat you." Connor hugged her tightly, grateful for her loyalty, but terrified for her. She was still dependent on their parents for college tuition, and he knew they wouldn't hesitate to use that against her. "Stay here as long as you need," he said, and Ethan nodded, already pulling out blankets to make up the couch. That night, as Sophie slept, Connor and Ethan sat at the kitchen table, planning their next move. Connor's business was thriving, but the emotional toll was mounting. "I can't keep waiting for her to change," Connor admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan reached for his hand. "Then don't. Live for you. For us." The next day, Connor received an email that stopped him cold. It was from his mother's best friend, Patricia, a woman he'd known since childhood. She'd been at the party, one of the few who hadn't spoken up when the confrontation happened. Her message was brief but heavy. "Connor, I need to talk to you about Eleanor. Meet me at the cafe on 5th Avenue tomorrow. Please." Connor's stomach churned. Was this a trap? Another lecture about family loyalty? Ethan urged him to go, sensing it could be a turning point. So Connor agreed, arriving at the cafe with his guard up. Patricia, elegant in a cream suit, greeted him with a hesitant smile. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice soft. "I should have said something at the party. You didn't deserve that." Connor was stunned. Patricia went on to explain that Eleanor had been unraveling since the party, torn between her social image and her love for her son. "She's stubborn," Patricia said, "but she's hurting. She misses you, even if she won't admit it." Connor's throat tightened. "Then why won't she talk to me?" Patricia sighed. "She's afraid. Of what people will think, of what it means to accept you. But she's starting to see what she's losing." She reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Give her time. And keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference." The conversation left Connor reeling. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope, not for a perfect reconciliation, but for something better than silence. He returned home and told Ethan and Sophie everything, their faces lighting up with cautious optimism. "Maybe she'll come around," Sophie said, her voice hopeful. Ethan, ever practical, added, "And if she doesn't, you've got us." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of events. Connor planned a wedding for a queer couple in Williamsburg, a fundraiser for a local LGBTQ+ shelter, and a corporate gala in Manhattan. Each success built his confidence, but it was the smaller moments, Ethan's proud smiles, Sophie's late-night talks, that kept him grounded. Then, one evening, Connor received a package in the mail. It was small, unassuming, with no return address. Inside was one of the invitations he'd designed for his mother's party, its gold foil catching the light. Tucked beside it was a note in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "I kept this. I don't know why." No signature, no apology, just those words. But to Connor, they were a crack in the wall, a sign that maybe, just maybe, his mother was listening. The note from Eleanor sat on Connor's desk for days, its words both a wound and a whisper of hope. He didn't know how to respond. Should he call her? Right back? Or let it be, as Ethan suggested, and focus on the life he was building? The uncertainty was maddening, but Connor's work kept him anchored. Trembly Events was no longer a dream but a reality, with a growing client list and a reputation for creating unforgettable moments. Sophie, now a semi-permanent fixture in the apartment, was thriving at NYU and had become Connor's unofficial cheerleader. She'd started helping with his events, her creativity shining through in small touches like hand-painted place cards. One night, as they sorted through fabric samples for a client's wedding, she looked at Connor with a grin. "You're kind of a big deal now, huh?" Connor laughed, tossing a swatch at her. "Don't let it go to my head." But the weight of his mother's note lingered. Connor confided in Lila during a planning session for her art gallery's Pride event. "She sent me this," he said, showing her the note. Lila's eyes narrowed. Classic Eleanor. She's reaching out, but she's too proud to say sorry. She leaned back, thoughtful. "You should invite her to one of your events. Force her to see what you've built." The idea was bold, risky, and terrifying. Connor mulled it over for days, his heart torn between hope and fear of another rejection. Ethan, ever his voice of reason, supported the idea. "If she says no, you're no worse off. But if she says yes, it could change everything." So Connor did it. He sent Eleanor an invitation to the Pride event, a celebration of queer love and resilience at Lila's gallery. The invitation was simple but elegant, with a personal note. "Mom, I'd love for you to see what I'm doing. This is who I am." He mailed it with trembling hands, unsure if he'd just opened a door or burned a bridge. The night of the Pride event arrived, a vibrant explosion of color and music in the heart of Chelsea. Connor had transformed the gallery into a wonderland of rainbow lights, live performances, and art installations celebrating queer stories. Ethan's designs adorned the walls, and Sophie worked the crowd, handing out programs with a grin. Connor, in a tailored blazer, moved through the space, greeting guests and ensuring everything ran smoothly. But his eyes kept darting to the door, searching for Eleanor. She didn't come. As the night wore on, Connor's hope faded, replaced by a familiar ache. He threw himself into his role, smiling for clients, laughing with Lila, and stealing moments with Ethan on the dance floor. The event was a triumph, with guests raving about the atmosphere and bloggers snapping photos for their feeds. But Eleanor's absence was a shadow Connor couldn't shake. After the last guest left, Connor sat on a bench outside the gallery, the city humming around him. Ethan joined him, their shoulders brushing. "I'm sorry she didn't show," Ethan said softly. Connor nodded, his throat tight. "I thought maybe this time." Ethan took his hand. "You gave her a chance. That's more than she's given you." The next morning, Connor woke to a voicemail from Patricia. "Connor, it's me. Eleanor got your invitation. She didn't come, but she cried when she read it. She's not ready yet, but she's closer than you think." The words were a lifeline, fragile but real. Connor played the message again, letting the possibility of change sink in. Over the next month, Connor's business soared. He planned a high-profile charity auction, a drag show fundraiser, and a small, intimate vow renewal for an older gay couple who'd been together for 40 years. Each event was a reminder of why he did this, to create spaces where people could celebrate who they were unapologetically. But the voicemail from Patricia stayed with him, a spark of hope he couldn't extinguish. Then, one crisp October evening, Connor received a call from an unknown number. He answered, expecting a client, but the voice on the other end stopped him cold. "Connor," Eleanor said, her voice unsteady. "Can we talk?" Connor's heart pounded. He agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe in Westchester, near the home he'd once called his own. Ethan offered to come, but Connor knew this was something he had to face alone. As he drove out of the city, the familiar streets of his childhood felt both foreign and achingly familiar. What did she want? An apology? A confrontation? Or something else entirely? At the cafe, Eleanor sat by the window, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. She looked older, more vulnerable than Connor remembered. When he sat down, she didn't meet his eyes at first. "I saw the pictures from your Pride event," she said finally. "It was beautiful." Connor waited, his heart in his throat. "I'm trying to understand," she continued, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can, but I don't want to lose you." The words were imperfect, halting, but they were more than Connor had ever expected. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "I'm still your son," he said. "I just need you to see me." For the first time in years, Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him, and her eyes were wet with tears. The cafe meeting with Eleanor wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but it was a start. She didn't apologize outright, and Connor didn't ask her to. Instead, they talked, haltingly at first, about small things: Sophie's studies, the weather, the peonies from the party. When Connor mentioned Ethan, Eleanor stiffened but didn't shut down. It was progress, fragile but real. Back in Brooklyn, Connor felt lighter than he had in years. He told Ethan and Sophie everything, their faces a mix of relief and cautious hope. "She's trying," Connor said, his voice soft. "That's more than I thought I'd get." Ethan pulled him into a hug, whispering, "You deserve this." Sophie, ever the optimist, grinned. "Told you she'd come around." Over the next few months, Connor's relationship with his mother inched forward. She called occasionally, asking about his events or sharing small updates about her life. She even attended one of his smaller events, a book launch for a queer author, standing awkwardly at the back, but staying until the end. She didn't embrace his identity, but she was there, and that was enough for now. Trembly events continued to thrive, becoming a beacon for inclusive celebrations. Connor hired Sophie as a part-time assistant, and she brought a youthful energy to the team. Ethan's designs became the signature of their brand, his vibrant artwork gracing every invitation and backdrop. Lila remained their biggest cheerleader, connecting them with clients across the city. But the real turning point came a year after the fateful party. Connor was planning a massive Pride festival in Brooklyn, a celebration of love in all its forms. He hesitated to invite Eleanor, unsure if she was ready for such a bold display of queer joy. But Sophie insisted. "She needs to see this," she said. "All of it." So Connor sent the invitation, his heart in his throat. On the day of the festival, Brooklyn buzzed with color and music. Drag queens strutted on a main stage, couples danced under rainbow banners, and families, chosen and biological, laughed together in the sun. Connor was everywhere, directing vendors, checking sound systems, and stealing kisses with Ethan when no one was looking. Sophie worked the entrance, her pride flag pin gleaming on her jacket. And then he saw her. Eleanor, in a simple blue dress, stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Connor approached, his heart pounding. "You came," he said, his voice barely audible over the music. Eleanor nodded, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to see you." "This." She gestured to the festival, the joy, the love. They walked together through the crowd, Connor pointing out the details he'd planned. The mural Ethan had designed, the food trucks supporting local queer businesses, the stage where a trans poet was performing. Eleanor listened, her silence thoughtful rather than cold. When they reached a quiet corner, she turned to him. "I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "Not about everything. I'm still learning. But about you. I'm so proud of you, Connor." The words broke something open in Connor. He hugged her, tears streaming down his face. And for the first time in years, she hugged him back. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Ethan joined them, his smile radiant, and Sophie ran over, throwing her arms around both of them. The festival roared on, a celebration of love and resilience, and Connor felt like he was part of it, not just as a planner, but as a son, a partner, a brother. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Connor stood with his chosen family and his mother, the weight of rejection lifting. He'd built a life that was his, filled with love and purpose. And though the road had been long, he knew now that he'd never been alone. The guests at his mother's party had seen him, his community had lifted him, and now, finally, his mother was starting to see him too. The festival ended with fireworks, their colors bursting across the sky. Connor held Ethan's hand, Sophie's laughter ringing in his ears, and Eleanor's quiet presence grounding him. He'd planned a party that changed his life, and in doing so, he'd found a truth worth celebrating. Love, in all its forms, was worth fighting for.